You are sitting in a room you built with your own hands. Every brick was earned, every wall was paid for in sleepless nights and calculated sacrifices, and yet the room feels empty. There is a version of your life you have been chasing for so long that you have forgotten what it felt like before the chase began. Niccolo Machiavelli knew this room. He lived in it for 14 years. In 1512, the man who had engineered the political architecture of Florence was stripped of everything overnight. His title, his influence, his purpose. He was tortured, imprisoned, and exiled to a farmhouse where he spent his days chopping wood and playing cards with peasants. He had lost everything he had spent a lifetime gripping, and it was only then, in the silence of total defeat, that he wrote the most dangerous book on power ever composed. The question no one asks is this: why did the insight come only after he stopped reaching for it? That question will unravel something inside you today, something you have been carrying without knowing its name. There is a specific kind of exhaustion that ambition produces. It is not physical. It is not even mental in the way most people understand the word. It is the exhaustion of perpetual reaching. You wake up already behind. Your first conscious thought is a measurement. How far you still have to go, how much remains undone, how the gap between where you are and where you need to be has somehow widened overnight, despite everything you gave yesterday. This is not laziness. This is not a lack of discipline. This is the signature symptom of a mind that has fused its identity with an outcome it does not yet possess. Machiavelli understood this fusion better than any thinker before or since. In The Prince, he observed that the rulers who clung most tightly to power were always the first to lose it. The ones who governed with a loose hand, who treated their position as a tool rather than an extension of their soul, were the ones who endured. He was not writing about politics. He was writing about you. The psychological term for what you are experiencing is goal fixation. It is the state in which your nervous system becomes so locked onto a desired future that it loses the ability to operate effectively in the present. Your body knows this feeling even if your vocabulary does not. It is the tightness in your chest when you check your metrics. The hollow sensation after a win that should have felt like triumph, but instead felt like temporary relief. The way you cannot enjoy a single evening without a voice whispering that you should be working. You have been told this is the price of greatness, that suffering is the currency of success. But Machiavelli discovered something far more unsettling. The suffering is not the price. The suffering is the obstacle, and it has been hiding in plain sight inside the very ambition you worship. The mechanism is older than psychology, older than philosophy. It operates at the level of the nervous system itself. When you fixate on an outcome, when your identity becomes dependent on achieving a specific result, your brain enters a state that cognitive scientists call threat monitoring. Your amygdala, the ancient alarm system buried deep in your temporal lobe, begins scanning your environment not for opportunities, but for evidence of failure. Every interaction becomes a test. Every silence becomes a rejection. Every delay becomes proof that you are falling behind. This is not a character flaw. This is neurology. Your brain cannot distinguish between a saber-toothed tiger and an unmet quarterly target. When survival feels like it depends on an outcome, your entire nervous system shifts into fight or flight, and it stays there. Machiavelli witnessed this mechanism destroy the most powerful men in Europe. Cesare Borgia, the prince upon whom Machiavelli modeled his masterwork, conquered half of Italy through brilliant strategy and ruthless calculation. But in the final years, Borgia became obsessed with consolidating what he had taken. He stopped adapting. He stopped reading the room. He began gripping his territory so tightly that his generals grew suspicious, his allies grew resentful, and his enemies grew bold. Borgia did not fall because he lacked power. He fell because his desperation to keep power made him rigid. And rigidity in a world that demands fluidity is a death sentence. The root cause is not ambition itself. Ambition is neutral. It is simply directed energy. The root cause is attachment. It is the moment when your sense of self becomes welded to the outcome so completely that losing the goal feels identical to losing yourself. Think of it as a closed fist around water. The tighter you squeeze, the faster it pours through your fingers. But if you open your hand, if you hold the water with a relaxed palm, it stays. This is not metaphor. This is the precise mechanical relationship between psychological attachment and effective action. And Machiavelli encoded it into every chapter he ever wrote, disguised as political advice. The reason this truth remains hidden is that it contradicts every message modern culture has fed you about how success works. Tell me in the comments, when did you first notice that the tighter you gripped something, the faster it slipped away? A relationship, a career milestone, a version of yourself you were desperate to become. Name the moment. You do not need to have it figured out. Just name it. Subscribe if you want to keep going. What comes next changes everything. Once you understand the mechanism, you begin to see it everywhere. It wears disguises. It hides inside behaviors you have always believed were virtues. There are 4 primary ways this attachment manifests in your daily life. You will recognize at least 2 of them immediately. The others will haunt you later tonight when the room is quiet. The first manifestation is compulsive overwork disguised as dedication. You stay late not because the work demands it, but because stopping feels dangerous. The moment you rest, the monitoring begins. Are you falling behind? Is someone outpacing you? Did you miss something critical while you were sleeping? You have built a life where productivity is your only reliable source of self-worth. When you are working, you feel legitimate. When you are not, you feel fraudulent. So you never stop. Machiavelli saw this pattern in the princes who micromanaged their courts. They inspected every document, attended every meeting, trusted no one with delegation. They believed this was diligence, it was fear, and it made them blind to the larger strategic movements that eventually destroyed them. You are not dedicated. You are terrified of the silence that would follow if you stopped. The second manifestation is the obsessive curation of how others perceive you. You rehearse conversations before they happen. You analyze text messages for hidden meanings. You craft your public image with the precision of a jeweler cutting a diamond, not because you enjoy the craft, but because you believe the diamond is the only thing keeping people close. Every social interaction becomes a performance. Every compliment is currency. Every criticism is a structural failure. You do this because your attachment to being valued has replaced your ability to simply be present. You are not connecting with people. You are managing them. And they feel it. They sense the invisible strings. And one by one, they quietly step away from the stage you have built around yourself. The third manifestation is analysis paralysis, dressed as strategic thinking. You research endlessly. You plan obsessively. You create elaborate systems, frameworks, and contingency maps for outcomes that have not yet occurred and may never occur. You tell yourself this is wisdom, this is preparation. This is what separates the amateur from the professional. But the truth is simpler and more painful. You are not preparing. You are delaying. Because the moment you act, the outcome becomes real, and a real outcome can be a real failure. As long as you remain in the planning phase, the dream stays pristine, untouched, perfect in its hypothetical form. Machiavelli reserved his sharpest contempt for this pattern. He wrote that the man who deliberates endlessly while the moment passes is worse than the man who acts boldly and fails. The deliberator has not even entered the arena. He has forfeited by default while convincing himself he is being clever. Your planning is not intelligence. It is a sophisticated form of hiding. The fourth manifestation is the most devastating because it arrives after you have already won. You achieve the goal, the number hits, the contract is signed, the person says yes, and for a brief, flickering moment, perhaps an hour, perhaps a day, you feel the relief you have been chasing. Then it evaporates. The emptiness returns deeper than before because now you cannot blame it on not having enough. You have the thing, and you still feel incomplete. So you set a new target, a higher bar, a bigger number, and the cycle begins again. This is the clearest proof that the attachment was never about the goal. It was about the desperate belief that achieving the goal would finally make you feel like yourself. But a self built on external validation has no floor. It is a house with no foundation, and every achievement is another story added to a structure that is already swaying. You recognize these patterns because you have lived inside them. Some for years, some for your entire adult life. The The question is no longer whether this describes you. The question is what to do once you see it clearly. Machiavelli's genius was not in teaching men how to seize power. Every tyrant in history understood seizure. His genius was in understanding what happens after. In chapter 25 of The Prince, he wrote that fortune is like a river in flood. It destroys everything in the path of the man who tries to stand against it. But the man who builds levees in calm weather, who prepares without desperation, channels the flood into irrigation. This is not passivity. This is the highest form of strategic action. It is effort without attachment, preparation without obsession, movement without the stench of need. The paradox operates on a precise psychological mechanism. When you release your attachment to the outcome, three things happen simultaneously in your nervous system. First, your amygdala deactivates its threat response. The constant scanning for failure stops. Your prefrontal cortex, the seat of creativity, strategic thinking, and adaptive problem-solving, comes back online. You can think clearly for the first time in months. Second, your behavior becomes fluid. You stop forcing specific responses from people and situations. You start reading the room. You adapt. You notice opportunities that were invisible when your vision was locked onto a single point on the horizon. Third, and this is the part that feels almost supernatural, other people respond to your shifted energy. When you stop needing someone to say yes, they sense the absence of pressure. Their psychological reactance dissolves. They move toward you instead of away. Machiavelli observed this dynamic in every successful ruler he studied. Lorenzo de' Medici did not hold Florence through force. He held it through what appeared to be effortless generosity. He funded artists, hosted festivals, and gave the citizens of Florence the feeling that his power was their prosperity. He did not grip the city. He opened his hand, and the city chose to stay. Compare this to Girolamo Savonarola, the monk who seized Florence through fanaticism and moral terror. Savonarola gripped the city with religious fervor, burning books and art, demanding absolute obedience. His rule lasted 4 years before the people he had terrorized burned him at the stake in the same public square where he had burned their paintings. The gripping hand creates rebellion. The open hand creates loyalty. This principle scales to every domain of your life. In business, the entrepreneur who obsesses over every sale repels customers. The one who builds something genuinely valuable and lets the market discover it creates demand that compounds without effort. In relationships, the person who monitors every text, who keeps score, who suffocates their partner with the weight of unspoken expectations, drives love out of the room. The person who is genuinely fulfilled, who does not need the relationship to feel whole, becomes magnetic. In creative work, the artist who calculates virality produces content that smells of desperation. The audience feels the manipulation and scrolls past. The artist who creates from genuine obsession with the craft, who has detached from the metrics entirely, produces work that resonates at a frequency algorithms cannot manufacture. There's a line that runs from Machiavelli's Florence back through 2,000 years to the porches of ancient Rome. Marcus Aurelius, emperor of the most powerful civilization on earth, wrote in his private journal words that Machiavelli would have recognized instantly. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. The Stoics called this the dichotomy of control. There are things within your power, your effort, your intention, your response, and things beyond it. Other people's decisions, market forces, the timing of opportunity. When you attach your identity to outcomes that fall outside your control, you hand the keys to your emotional stability to the universe. And the universe is not a careful driver. Machiavelli added a darker layer to this insight. He understood that the appearance of not caring is itself a form of power. When others cannot read your desperation, they cannot use it against you. Your detachment becomes armor. Your loosened grip becomes a weapon. This is not manipulation. This is clarity. You are not pretending to be indifferent. You are engineering a genuine internal state in which the outcome truly does not determine your worth. And from that state, your actions become sharper, your timing improves, and your presence commands a gravity that no amount of forced charisma can replicate. If this reframe has shifted something in you, if you can feel the difference between gripping and holding, alike puts this in front of someone else who is still white-knuckling their way through a life that keeps slipping away. You have been operating under the assumption that achievement produces peace, that once you get the thing, the anxiety will stop, that the finish line is where rest lives. The inversion is this: peace produces achievement. Rest is not the reward. Rest is the prerequisite. The man who goes into the negotiation already at peace with walking away is the man who closes the deal. The woman who enters the relationship already whole is the woman who is chosen. The creator who makes the work because the work itself is enough is the creator whose work travels the farthest. You have had the equation backwards your entire life. You have been trying to earn the right to feel calm. But calm is not earned. It is chosen. And the moment you choose it, before the evidence, before the proof, before the result, everything you have been chasing begins to arrive. This is not wishful thinking. This is the mechanical consequence of a nervous system that has been freed from threat monitoring. When your brain stops scanning for failure, it starts scanning for opportunity. The same neural hardware, the same processing power, pointed in the opposite direction. Machiavelli spent 14 years in exile. He lost his career, his status, his identity, and in that loss, his mind, freed from the desperate grip of political ambition, produced a work of such penetrating clarity that it has shaped the thinking of every strategist for 500 years. The masterpiece was not created despite the loss. It was created because of it. The question is no longer whether you can change. The question is whether you are willing to let go before life forces your hand. The first practice is what Machiavelli demonstrated without ever naming it. It is the evening audit of attachment. Each night before sleep, you sit with a single question. What did I grip today? You do not judge the answer. You do not punish yourself for the gripping. You simply name it. I gripped the client's response. I gripped my partner's mood. I gripped the number on the screen. Naming the attachment is the act that begins dissolving it. As long as the grip operates in the dark, it controls you. The moment you drag it into conscious awareness, its power diminishes. You are not trying to stop gripping. You are training yourself to notice the grip in real time, so that tomorrow you catch it 30 seconds earlier. Within weeks, you will begin noticing the grip as it forms, rather than after it has already shaped your behavior. This is not meditation. This is strategic self-surveillance. Machiavelli would have approved. The second practice addresses the void that attachment fills. When you release the grip on outcomes, there is a moment of vertigo. If I am not chasing the goal, what am I doing? Who am I without the pursuit? The answer is the craft anchor. You choose one domain of your daily work, the most fundamental, most boring, most process-level element, and you fall in love with it deliberately. If you are a writer, it is the sentence, not the book deal, not the audience, the sentence. If you are in business, it is the conversation with the customer, not the revenue, not the growth chart, the single conversation happening right now. You redirect the energy that was being consumed by outcome monitoring into the texture of the present action. This is not positive thinking. This is neurological redirection. You are giving your operating process a task so absorbing that the monitoring process starves. Machiavelli did this in exile. He dressed in his finest clothes each evening, entered his study, and conversed with the ancients through their books. He did not write The Prince to reclaim his career. He wrote it because the act of thinking at that depth was its own reward. The career never returned. The masterpiece endured for 5 centuries. The craft outlived the ambition. The third practice is the one that will feel the most uncomfortable. It is the controlled rehearsal of loss. Once per week, you sit in silence and you let yourself fully imagine the worst outcome. The business fails, the relationship ends, the project is rejected. You do not rush past the image. You sit inside it. You feel the weight of it. You let your nervous system experience the fear without resistance. And then you ask one question. If this happened, who would I still be? The Stoics called this premeditatio malorum. Machiavelli practiced it instinctively. In his letters from exile, he wrote with startling calm about the possibility that he would never return to public life. He had already accepted the loss, and that acceptance freed him to think with a clarity that his years of political ambition had never permitted. When you rehearse loss voluntarily, you rob it of its power to ambush you. The fear does not disappear, but it becomes familiar. And familiar fear cannot hijack your nervous system the way unknown fear can. You are not becoming indifferent to your life. You are becoming unbreakable within it. There is a vast difference between a man who does not care and a man who has already made peace with the worst. The first is hollow. The second is free. You began in a room you built with your own hands, every brick earned, every wall paid for, and the room felt empty. It felt empty because you were not in it. You were always somewhere else, in the future, in the plan, in the anxious space between where you stood and where you believed you needed to be. Machiavelli spent 14 years in a farmhouse he never chose. He played cards with men who could not read. He chopped wood in clothing that once walked the halls of the Palazzo Vecchio. And in that room, the smallest, quietest room of his life, he produced the work that made him immortal. He did not produce it by gripping harder. He produced it by finally letting go. The room you have built is not empty. You have simply been too busy staring through its windows to notice what is already inside. Everything you want is on the other side of the grip you refuse to release. The career is waiting behind the obsession with the career. The love is waiting behind the fear of losing love. The peace is waiting behind the desperate chase for peace. You do not need to become someone else. You need to stop white-knuckling the person you think you are supposed to be and let the person you already are finally breathe. Machiavelli never returned to power. He died in 1527, still in exile, still waiting for a summons that never came. But the book he wrote in that quiet room outlived every prince he ever served. It outlived the Medici, it outlived the Borgia, it outlived Florence itself. The thing he stopped chasing became the thing that made him eternal. There is a difference between understanding a truth and living inside it. You now see the mechanism. You see how the grip destroys the thing it holds. You see how Machiavelli's exile became his liberation. But seeing is not enough. You must practice. The first practice is the simplest and the most difficult. It is the practice of empty hands. Every morning, before you reach for your phone, before you check the metrics, before you scan your inbox for evidence that the world has finally recognized you, you sit with your hands open on your knees, palms up, fingers uncurled, and you say one sentence to yourself, not as affirmation, not as performance, as fact. I am willing to lose all of it, the career, the relationship, the reputation, the number in the account, the image you have spent years sculpting. You hold each one in your mind, and you open your hand beneath it. This is not nihilism. This is not pretending you do not care. This is the deliberate daily act of loosening the grip before it has time to calcify. Machiavelli did not choose exile, but when exile chose him, the years he spent forcing his way back into the corridors of power produced nothing. The moment he stopped forcing, the moment he sat down at a wooden desk with open hands and simply wrote what he knew, everything changed. You do not have to wait for exile to find you. You can practice the open hand now today, before the loss comes. When you rehearse surrender, actual surrender becomes unnecessary. The universe rarely takes from those who have already demonstrated they can survive the taking. The second practice is surgical. It requires you to destroy a habit so deeply embedded you do not even recognize it as a habit. You must stop measuring the distance between where you are and where you want to be. That distance is the white bear. Every time you calculate the gap, every time you check how far you still have to go, how much more you still need, how many months or years separate you from the version of yourself you worship, you activate the monitoring process. You flood your nervous system with the chemistry of lack, and lack is the scent that drives the world away from you. The practice is this. You choose one task, the single most important action you can take today, not this quarter, not this year, today. And you give that task the entirety of your attention, not 90%, not the distracted half-focus of a mind that keeps glancing at the horizon, the whole of your presence. A bricklayer does not build a cathedral by staring at the spire. He builds it by placing one brick with absolute precision, then another, then another. The spire is an abstraction. The brick is real. Machiavelli did not write The Prince by imagining its legacy. He wrote it chapter by chapter, sentence by sentence, in a cold room by candlelight. He was not writing for the future. He was writing because writing was the only honest action available to him in that moment. When you fall in love with the brick, when the act of laying it becomes its own reward, you stop emitting the frequency of desperation. You stop broadcasting hunger. Instead, you broadcast something far more magnetic: mastery. And mastery, unlike ambition, never repels, it only attracts. The third practice is the most counterintuitive. It asks you to do the thing every instinct in your body will resist. You must walk toward the fear instead of away from it, not the fear of failure. You have already addressed that with the pre-mortem. This is a different fear. This is the fear of being seen without your armor. Every desperate act you have ever committed, every time you chased, every time you over-explained, every time you performed confidence instead of possessing it, was an attempt to avoid a single terrifying experience. The experience of being witnessed in your incompleteness and discovered to be enough anyway. You have been operating under the assumption that you must earn the right to stop chasing, that once you achieve enough, accumulate enough, prove enough, then you can relax. Then you can be yourself. Then the grip can soften. This is the inversion. The grip must soften first. The relaxation must come before the achievement. The being must precede the doing. The practice is exposure. You begin placing yourself in situations where the outcome is genuinely uncertain, and you do not attempt to control it. You make the pitch without rehearsing your closing line 14 times. You send the message without crafting 7 drafts. You state your position in the meeting without preloading 3 backup arguments in case they disagree. You let the moment be what it is: imperfect, unscripted, alive. Machiavelli's greatest political moves were not his most calculated ones. They were the moments when he trusted his instinct over his preparation, when he read the room instead of reading his notes, when he let the conversation breathe instead of strangling it toward a predetermined conclusion. The paradox reveals itself again. The less you try to control the impression you make, the more powerful the impression becomes, because authenticity is the one thing the human nervous system cannot fake and cannot resist. There is a weight you have been carrying that does not belong to you. It is the weight of the future, the weight of every outcome you have tried to guarantee, every scenario you have rehearsed, every contingency you have planned for, every catastrophe you have pre-lived in the theater of your anxious mind. You have been carrying tomorrow on your shoulders while trying to walk through today, and you are wondering why your legs are shaking. Machiavelli wrote extensively about fortune, what he called fortuna. He described it as a river. When the river is calm, men build beside it, they plant crops, they construct bridges, they forget the river entirely. Then the flood comes, and it destroys everything. But Machiavelli did not conclude that preparation was futile. He concluded that the wise man builds levees during the calm, not out of fear, but out of respect for the nature of reality. He builds them, and then he goes home. He does not stand beside the river every night, watching the water, terrified of the rising. You have been standing beside the river. You have been watching the water for years, and the watching has exhausted you far more than any flood ever could. Put down the weight of tomorrow, not because tomorrow does not matter, but because the only place you can actually build the levee is today. And you cannot build anything with shaking hands. Everything you have heard in this room comes down to a single, irreducible truth. The thing you want most will arrive when you stop making its arrival the condition of your peace. This is not passive. This is not weak. This is the most aggressive act of psychological warfare you can wage against your own conditioning. Society installed the chasing program. Your parents installed the earning program. Your culture installed the proving program. And every one of those programs runs on the same operating system. You are not enough yet. If this reframe has landed somewhere real in you, if you feel the weight of it, alike puts this in front of someone who has been drowning in the same current and does not yet know there is a shore. The moment you uninstall that operating system, the moment you decide, with full clarity and full authority, that you are enough now, today, in this room, with these hands, with this imperfect and incomplete life, the chasing stops. And when the chasing stops, something extraordinary happens. The things you were chasing begin to move toward you. Not because of magic, not because of manifestation, because you have finally stopped emitting the frequency that repelled them. You have stopped broadcasting lack. You have stopped performing hunger. You have stopped gripping the steering wheel so tightly that the car could not turn. You have let go. And the road opened. In December of 1513, Machiavelli wrote a letter to his friend Francesco Vittori. In it, he described his evenings, how he would change out of his mud-stained farming clothes, put on the robes he once wore in the chancery, and enter his study. He wrote that for 4 hours he felt no boredom. He forgot every trouble. He did not fear poverty. Death did not frighten him. He transferred himself entirely into the work. He was not chasing power in those hours. He was not scheming his return. He was simply present, fully, completely, unreservedly present, with the only thing that was real, the work in front of him, the page beneath his hand, the thought forming in his mind. That is the state you're looking for, not the destination, the state. And the state was never at the end of the road. It was available to you the entire time. You simply could not access it because your hands were too full of things you were afraid to drop. Go back to the room you built. Stand in it. Look around. The walls are still standing. The door is still open. The light is still coming through the window. You are still here. And for the first time, you are not looking through the glass at something better. You are not calculating the distance to a future that does not exist yet. You are not gripping. You are standing in the room you built, and the room is full. It is full of every lesson that brought you here. Every failure that taught you what force cannot accomplish. Every moment of surrender that felt like death and turned out to be birth. Machiavelli never got what he wanted. He got something better. He got the truth, and the truth outlived everything he chased. You are not behind. You are not failing. You are not running out of time. You are exactly where the work begins. And the work does not require your panic. It requires your presence. Let go, not because it does not matter, because it matters so much that it deserves better than your desperation. It deserves your mastery. If you want to keep going, subscribe. There is more of this waiting, and it goes this deep every time. The grip was never your strength. Letting go was always the thing that set you free. Thank you for being here. I will see you in the next